I gotta think about it. Man, what the fuck you gotta think about? You're fat as fuck and you gotta think about getting in shape is what you would love to say to a prospect when they object to buying your coaching. But you're probably not selling them right, you're probably not closing them right, and you're probably not objection handling, which is part of your job as a coach to get somebody to change. And so in today's video, I'm gonna lay out a step-by-step framework all the way from opening the call to selling to closing and to objection handling any prospect, any situation, no matter where you're at in business, 0 or 10K a month. This works for every online fitness coach out there to sell more coaching. My name is Ryan Johnson. At the age of 22, I was able to make over $500,000 with online coaching. And I'm here today to share with you my sales secrets, which aren't really sales secrets, but these things are powerful if you can truly master them. The biggest pitfall I see a lot of beginning online fitness coaches have is they simply just don't understand how to sell. And understanding how to sell will not only sell your coaching, but it's going to apply to all aspects of making this happen. Everything from content to Instagram stories, to getting more leads, to texting your leads, to getting them on calls, and to actually getting those people to make a change and buy your stuff. So with that being said, let's turn you into a badass sales weapon. All right, so over the past couple of years, I've made over $500,000 selling my own coaching program. I've never had a closer on this offer, so I have closed every single deal I have ever sold, and it was all simply because I learned sales. Now, to bring you back, 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, I started posting online, and I didn't really make any money at all. I made like 5 cents on TikTok, maybe a couple $100 for like some lives, but I never started to make money until I launched my own business. And that was only like a couple $1,000s. And then once I learned sales, that's when I was hitting those 10K, 20K, 30K, 40K, 50K months. And so what I'm going to give you today is my $500,000 sales framework that you can use as well to sell more of your coaching. Now, this is specifically for fitness coaches, but this will apply to pretty much any coaching industry where you have people hopping on calls with you who want to buy something from you. Yeah, so here's some proof right here. Now, a couple things I want to go over here really quick is it's all about the mindset, okay? Sales is the transfer of belief. That's pretty much like all it is. That's how you can summarize sales. It is the transfer of your belief to the prospect, right? So what does that mean? You need to have incredible belief in your offer first off. That's the biggest thing. If you don't really believe you can transform that person's life on the call, they're not going to feel the energy transference through the screen. They're not going to feel the belief transference through the screen. You need to, and I did this practice, like a lot of times before my calls. When I was like starting out, I'd be like, I'm going to transform this person's life. I'm going to transform this person's life. And I would just imagine myself helping out this person. And I would hop on that call with that belief inside of me, and the other person could see it. You need to have incredible belief in your offer and your ability to transform somebody. That's the most important thing. If you don't have that, none of this will work. So I have some other videos on my YouTube channel. You can click the link in the description. I have a couple. So let's go over the 3 non-negotiables. First off, conviction. You got to be very convicted in what you're saying. So be authentic, high energy, and believe in the transformation. Pretty much what I just said right there with the transfer of beliefs. But a little addition to conviction is simply just when you are talking throughout the sales calls, you don't want to say like, what do you think about if like, kind of these terms that aren't super convicting, if that makes sense. And so once you start taking calls, like start to analyze those little things you can kind of get rid of throughout the call. Empathy is also a big one. So, the sales call is not therapy, of course. You don't let them yap your ear off forever, but put yourself in the prospect's shoes without buying into their limiting beliefs. Just try to help the prospect make an informed decision. That's just the mindset I want you to have. So with empathy, the best analogy I can give for you to make this very practical is like, be like a doctor. Go into the sales call kind of like you're a doctor and you're probing around to kind of find what's going on. So there's a symptom and there's a root cause of things, right? And so let's say you go into the doctor's office, right? And you have the symptom. You're like, I get this pounding migraine every single day of the week. I don't know how to get rid of it. I've tried ibuprofen. I've tried Tylenol. I've tried all these different things. The symptom is I have a pounding headache. The root cause of it is probably something like you're not drinking enough water or you're taking too many stimulants or something like that, right? So inside of that, what you want to be doing is listening to what the prospect is saying, listening to their symptom, but then helping them dig down to figure out the root cause of things. And then expertise. No one's going to buy it from somebody they don't respect. Have authority on the call. Carry yourself like an expert in your field. Be very convicted inside of everything and come off as an expert, right? They are looking to you for guidance. And so you have to present yourself as like, hey, I can guide you. I've done this before. And these are little adjustments you can kind of make inside of your language as well. So always review your sales calls and always go through them and ask yourself, are you being convicted? Are you being empathetic? Are you actually listening to the person and then digging down when they like spill some type of pain? And are you coming off as an expert, or you're that guy who's like, so bro, gee, what's going on? You're using those types of words, that type of slang. You're not coming off as an expert. Now let's move on to frame. Okay. Frame is everything for selling. It's everything. You need to have it the entire call. You need to have as much frame as possible, and you cannot let the prospect steal it. So the way to get the frame right away is win the first 60 seconds by grabbing frame of the conversation right away. Now, how do you do that? Very good question. A lot of people explain it this way. It's like hop on the call and be like, look, you set the frame of the call. Here's how the call is going to go, and get them to agree to the frame. That's definitely a good way, and I'll explain that in case you don't understand it. This is like the most beginner basic way to gain frame. Hey, John, what's going on, man? What's going on? Okay, get your camera on. What's up? So here's how the call is going to go today. I want to get to know a little bit about you, and also, what are your goals? Where do you want to go? And see if I can't help you out. And, if I can, well, we can work something out. If not, I'll point you in the right direction. That's a simple way that a lot of people lay frame, which is the right one. I've used it as well. It's not terrible. I think a better way to win frame right away is get the person to laugh. So the best way to get the person to laugh is literally just like ask a joke in the very beginning. It's sometimes hard to actually like put it inside of there. But when you get on the call, this is how I do it now, is the way I set the frame is I go through the DMs and I look at what we were talking about. So, hey, John, in the DMs, we were talking about X, Y, and Z. You said you were trying to lose some lower belly fat, which, I think everybody is trying to do that. And also looks like you're trying to get 6-pack abs and finally build that confidence. So, I'm guessing you can go pull some baddies this summer, right? Just kind of joking around. One I love using too is like, there's no guarantees in life besides death and taxes. Like that's a great one. Just anything to kind of bust a joke is a really good way to do it. Another part of frame is don't come off too friendly. Don't use bro or dude. You may slip it in here or there, but just like try to remove bro, dude, G, stuff like that too much. Moving on to lead the prospect to the solution. So simply what that means is you may know the solution. You may like hear everything they're talking about. Like, bro, I got it. All you need is a meal plan, you need a train program, bro. You got to get the 10,000 daily steps, and you got to get motivated, got to get in a routine. It's like, that's a terrible way to fuck it up because prospects believe everything that comes out of their mouths and like nothing that comes out of your mouth. And so when you know the solution to their struggle, lead them to the answer. So they may come to you and be like, yeah, I've been struggling to lose lower belly fat, blah, 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 blah. And we go, okay, let's dig into this. I'm curious, are you tracking your macros? Yeah, I eat like 200 grams of protein. Okay, are you tracking all of them? Yeah, just the protein. I'm eating like 4,000 calories. Well, what about the carbs and what about the fats? Yeah, I don't really know those. Gotcha. Like genuine question. Do you think you're going to be able to get the body you want without actually understanding your macros and what macros to also eat? And then they're going to say no. Like clearly, no. Anybody with one IQ is going to say that. So you could just said that to them, but the fact that you led them to that answer that, oh, I need to have set macros and I need to track them in order to get in shape, that's so much more powerful. Second, you can't tell them what the solution is. They must say it themselves, like I just said. Don't assume anything. Be insanely curious. Inside of your mind, you may just like assume that, okay, this person likes me. They trust me. They understand who I am. They understand what I do. They understand why I do it. They understand how I do it. We like to assume these things because we're living them. We are us. But the other person has probably only seen, I don't know, let's say 25, maybe at most 50% of all of our content. And so don't assume anything, right? Be curious inside of them, but also be looking to help them understand, like, who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? And how do you do it throughout the call? Make sure they fully get it. Give them your best every single time. You may have just came off a call where you didn't close. Just like wipe it away, man. Tell yourself you're going to transform somebody's life. Get on the call and get after it. Don't push them. Ask a lot. So wise. So what that means is like, don't just try to push them through the call. Get the job done quick. Ask lots of whys. So if you're at the very end and you're pitching them and they're like, yeah, I want to do this. A lot of people are like, okay, let's get it done. What you should add in there is like, cool. Why exactly? I'm just curious. Push them back a little, matter of fact. And don't just ask questions randomly. Know the answer they need to hear and ask the right questions to lead them to the answer. right? So a lot of people do this. They'll just ask random questions. I was watching one of my clients' calls the other day, and this guy just pained up the whole bunch about struggling with motivation and blah, blah, blah. And then my client goes, "Are you taking any supplements?" When I was watching it, I stood up and I just laughed my ass off for like 5 minutes, and I screamed at him because I'm like, "You're a dumbass. There's no way. There's no way. You're just asking random questions. Like, what's going on there?" Know the answer they need to hear and ask them the right questions to lead them to the answer. So I would have heard, "I'm struggling with motivation." And I would have said, well, I could have said, like, duh, you're struggling with motivation. You don't have a plan. You're not getting results. Of course, you're not going to be motivated to take action. Or you can say, I'm curious. Why do you think you struggle with motivation? "Oh, I think I struggle with it because blah, 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 blah." Okay. And then keep being curious. Keep digging down. What you're trying to do is lead them to the answer, which is because they're not getting results, they're not motivated. But if they were to get results because, they're showing up to the gym 5, 6 times a week, eating all their meals, now they're going to finally be motivated, because motivation is not a precursor. It is the reward. That's the biggest thing. 3 laws of human nature. Human brain comprehends words at a slower pace, better at a slower pace. So when there's especially things you want the prospect to understand, slow your words down. Yeah, you want to be a bit fast throughout it sometimes because it's going to show like expertise. It's going to show high energy, conviction, and belief inside of yourself. But there is certain parts throughout it where you do want to slow it down. People are inherently selfish as well. So say their name and frame everything for their benefit and not yours. That's the biggest thing, especially when it comes to closing. Never talk about your coaching. Never talk about what you're getting out of the deal. I've seen this all the time. People will try to be closing and they're like, "Okay, it's going to be 3K paid in full." And they're like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, whatever. And then the client, one of my clients will be like, "Well, we can do month to month. You can just pay me monthly." And I'm like, "Dude, you're framing it in your benefit. What you got to say is, interesting. Okay, so you do some objection handling. You go, do you think it would work for you if we could work out like maybe a monthly deal?" Now that's framed in their benefit. You're asking them, is month to month going to be something more comfortable and more affordable to them versus can you make month to month work for me? All right, frame everything in their benefit and not yours. Humans naturally want what they can't have, so always push them back at the right times, right? So towards the end of the call, when you're getting towards pitching them, that's when you're coming close to losing frame. As soon as you drop the price, all frame is gone. The frame goes to them. And so you need to build up as much frame as possible before you drop. So what that means is you got to push them back. All right, let's get into the actual sales call framework. So that's just some mental understandings. This is the step-by-step framework you're going to want to follow for that 60-minute call. Typically they're around 60 minutes. First off, take control of the frame of the conversation in the first 60 seconds. We went over that, right? Second is going to be dive into current situation by asking, so what motivated you to hop on the call today? Or, hey, this is what you said inside the DMs. What was the actual motivation for hopping on? Talk to me, right? And when you're diving into current situation, this should be around like 15, I would say 10 to 15 minutes long, right? You should be really getting to understand the person for like 10 to 15 minutes. And so what will typically happen is people will dump a whole bunch of shit on you. You'll let them talk 5, 10, 15 minutes long. And then a lot of people just don't know how to take that and digest it and break it down. If the prospect is nurtured and they like you, then yeah, they're going to talk for 5, 10 minutes sometimes and just tell you all of the shit that's going on. And so it's kind of like throwing like a cord of tangled wires at you. And it's up to you to untangle that. And so typically what I do is I just take that all in. And then right when they get done, I take a deep breath and I go, okay, that was a lot, man. That was a lot. But let's break it down step by step. Okay. Start me back from the very beginning. And so then I take a look at all the stuff they said and I break it down one by one by one by one. And what I'm doing there is I'm trying to figure out not just the symptom, but the root cause of each thing. And so sometimes when it comes to fitness coaching, people will come on to be like, yeah, so, back in high school, I was in incredible shape and I got to college and I got fat and then I got a job and I got back in shape and then I got married and I got out of shape and then she divorced me. And they say that for like 10, 15 minutes long. I'm like, gotcha. So start me all the way back. What exactly happened when you went to college that caused you to lose your shape, your physique, your discipline or your motivation for all this? I'm just curious, tell me about that. Right? The symptom is I got out of shape, but the root cause of it is probably that they got comfortable. Probably they didn't know what they were doing. Probably they didn't have accountability. And so I'm digging down. I'm being insanely curious about each and every single little rabbit hole from that entire story. Because what you're going to find is you're going to find patterns. You're going to find patterns of struggle that they are experiencing through these certain scenarios inside of life. And then once you start to see the patterns, then you know exactly what they need. So that's what I'm doing inside a current situation. Next, I move on to finding their goals and desires by simply asking, now that I really understand who you are, talk to me about like, what do you exactly want to achieve in the next 3 to 6 months from now and even beyond, right? And then this is where we're going to start this is where they're going to tell you like, okay, this is what I want to achieve. Of course, I want to get incredible shape and so on. And typically people only talk for like 30 seconds here. And so it's also up to you to amplify their goals, amplify their desires. Okay, that's awesome. You want to get in incredible shape, get 6-pack of abs. I'm curious though, like why exactly? And what you're doing is you're looking at every single goal and every single desire they have. You're asking why, and then you're digging even deeper sometimes. You're really trying to expand it. It's all about amplifying their current situation by digging down and amplifying their goals and desires by, once again, like expanding on that, extrapolating it, really getting a good vision in place. You got to fully flesh out where somebody's at and where they want to go to a high extent. You cannot take what they say at face value. You must, as a coach, dig deeper down, get them to think bigger. That right there in total should take 30 to 35 minutes most of the time, right? Once you understand A and B, once you understand where they're at and where they want to go, then you got to figure out why are they struggling exactly. Now, by the point in this call, you probably understand exactly why they're struggling, but this is where you still have to ask that question. So, okay, I understand this, John. This is where you're at and this is where you want to go. I refeed it all back to them. But tell me exactly why, or say, so tell me, what do you think is exactly stopping you from achieving this on your own? And then they'll go through and tell you everything you already knew. I don't know. I think I'm just blah, blah, blah and struggling with X, Y, and Z. Gotcha. Why do you think like having a structured meal plan in place would help you out? Okay, gotcha. Why do you think having accountability and, coach to check in with every single weekend would help you out? Okay, got you. When they tell you exactly why they're struggling, you once again have to ask why. Be insanely curious and frame it in their benefit. Why do you think this would help you out, right? Then we move on to creating urgency by asking them about the cost of inaction. So once you figure out the struggles, you go, okay, so this is great and all, but what happens if we don't make this change and achieve these goals? Like, are you going to be fine if the next 6 months of your life look like the past 6 months of your life? And just say it like that. Your job as a coach is to get somebody to change. They are coming to you because they want the cold, harsh truth that's going to get them to change. So you must ask that hard-hitting question. What's going to happen if the next 6 months of your life look like the past 6 months of your life? Are you going to be fine with that? What happens if you don't make a change? And this is extremely important to ask because when it comes to objection handling at the very end, if you have to do any of it, you're going to need their own words to use against them. You don't want to inflict pain. You simply want to amplify it by feeding back the words they said later on. And so sometimes objection handling, they go, let me just think about it. Let me put it off. I'll do it next month. But if you ask the question, what's going to happen if you don't make the change? And you simply say, I totally get that, man. But as we discussed earlier, you're not fine with letting the next 6 months of your life look like the past 6 months of your life. And so I'm curious. Well, why specifically don't you want to take action today? Why do you want to put it off for a month? Is it the fact that maybe it costs too much, or are you just, too comfortable in your current situation, right? You're clarifying exactly what's going on and you're just feeding them back the words. Lastly, you want to get them to sell themselves on taking action now by asking, so what makes you want to hire a fitness coach right now? Or you can ask it another way, so this is great and all, but why do you think right now is a great time to hire a fitness coach? And all they're going to do here is simply sell themselves and taking action today. They're going to tell you exactly why they should take action today, right? And then once again, you're going to use that later on if you have to objection handle to feed them back their own words. They say, I got to think about it. Awesome. Totally get that. But like you said earlier, you feel like you need to make a change today because of X, Y, and Z. So I'm just curious. Do you want to put it off for a month, or, do you want to think about it because maybe it's the price, or is it the fact that, maybe you don't want to actually make a change, right? Getting very clear on the actual objection. You need all this data right here to effectively objection handle later on. Moving on to the closing framework. So that's the sales framework. That's pretty much all you have to go through to create a sale. Now, closing is a bit different. This is where you actually close the person to make the sale happen. So this is my closing framework. The perfect fit pitch is what I call it. So pretty much how this works is after you get done with the sales framework, you go, okay, John, look, I think you're a great fit for my coaching. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not just saying that because, you want to lose 10 to 15 pounds, which is, what I specialize in, but specifically because when you were telling me about your story, I really resonated with X, Y, and Z. And matter of fact, that's the reason I started my coaching. Or matter of fact, that's exactly what my client, Jeffrey, who came to me 6 months ago, was, he was in that same exact spot you are right now. And he's made an incredible transformation. I love working with him. And so you really remind me of him, and I really want to work with you as well because that's what I'm here for. Like, why would I run this business if I'm not working with people I love to work with? So I think you're gonna be a perfect fit for this coaching, not only because I can help you out, but also specifically because I really like what you're trying to achieve here. That's what I call a perfect fit pitch. Is you are saying you're a good fit for my coaching because of this specific thing, and you're getting very personal inside of that perfect fit pitch. After you perfect fit pitch them, you got to ask permission to actually present your solution. So then you go, okay, John, so like I said, I think you're a great fit. Can I actually share with you how I would help you out inside of my coaching now? And they say, yeah, that'd be great. And so you go, okay, I'm going to break it down for you. And this is where you verbally commit how your coaching will bridge the gap between their struggles and their goals, right? You can screen share and show everything, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would simply just sit back and say, okay, so this is where you're at. Just re-explain to them, their current struggles. And then this is where you want to go. Re-explain to them where they want to go. And like you said, we've discovered that these are the specific struggles you currently have. And this is how my coaching is going to help you out. And then you simply break down, here's how the meal plan and the training program is going to help you out. Here's how the accountability is going to help you out. Here's maybe how, if you have community inside of your coaching, this is how it's going to help you out. You literally just tailor all of your pillars of your fitness coaching to their specific situation and to their specific goals, in addition to their specific struggles. So it's perfectly presented to them, right? Don't use a slideshow. Don't use like some fucking script. Tailor it to them specifically. And then after you go over it all, test the waters by asking, so after going over everything, John, does this sound like it will work for you? Right? Make sure that you guys are in agreement that this is going to work. You don't want to move on to closing if they don't believe it's going to work, So if you just move on to closing and you have to ask them it's going to work, well, then you have to deal with objections after you pitch them. And then you have no frame, So you got to say, does this sound like it will work for you? They're going to say yes. And then always ask also why. Like, what do you like most about it? Or why do you think this is going to work for you? Or, why do you think this coaching program is going to work for you versus the coach you had in the past who ultimately failed you? Now, this is the non-negotiables I was talking about earlier. List out 3 non-negotiables to get more micro commitments. So ask you after that why, and they explain exactly why, this is perfect for them. Then you go, this is awesome. But once again, I have a couple non-negotiables to my coaching and I want to make sure you're the right guy. List out those 3 non-negotiables and get more micro commitments out of them. Then you verbally communicate next steps to joining and make sure there's nothing stopping them from starting now. So simply how you do this is, okay, perfect. I knew you're the guy you said you are. So we'll go over actually how to get started today. Is that something you would like to hear about? They'll say yes. Go, awesome. Okay. So we'll talk about investment. And then once we figure out the best option for you, all we'll simply do is, we'll get payment processed, then we'll get you onboarded right away. There's a couple of things that are going to get you done, and then I'll get you meal plans and trade programs set up in about 24 to 48 hours, and then we'll hop on a call to go over it all, and we'll get you started. Does that sound like a plan? Yes, that sounds like a plan. Now they understand exactly how it works, and they also agreed to getting started today because you said, we're going to get this done right now on the call. And so if you get the pitching and they're like, can we do this? Can you shoot over to me an email or we'll hop off the call and we'll make it work out. They'll simply just say, oh, like I said earlier, we got to actually get you set up on the call. Remember when I said that? And they're like, yes. Now they can't back out of it because they gave you their commitment to, yeah, I'm good with getting set up right now. And then you go to the price drop. That's where you drop the price for your coaching. However you price your coaching, go ahead and drop it. So you say, look, Mr. Prospect, here's exactly how it works. It costs $2,000 for 3 months, $3,000 for 6 months. Which one works better for you? Just sit there and wait for them to answer. And then there's a couple of paths that will happen here after your price drop. Number one, the best one is they're like, yep, let's get it done. You get the payment done. You get the onboarded. The second one is you have to actually objection handle. So we're going to go over some objection handles here in a moment. Now, if you can't objection handle, if it just doesn't work out and you can't overcome their objections or whatever, always book a follow-up call. Always do that. Do not let somebody get off the call unless they have bought, unless they have hung up on you, unless you have effectively objection handled them and they have bought, or if you need to do a follow-up call. Other than that, talk to them until they fucking hang up, honestly. So let's move on to objection handling now. So this is going to be a universal flow for every single objection there is. And handling objections is honestly really easy. It's just all about having this correct mindset, which is simply like, this is the part where you're actually coaching them now, right? Majority of the time, people can make a coaching program work out, right? No matter what it costs, they can probably finance it. They can put a down payment. Like, you should be closing pretty much, I would say, 70 to 80% of every single person who gets on the call with you. They may not all close for your perfect pricing, but you can make something work out, especially if at the very beginning of your journey. You should be making every single deal work out because you can't demand prices yet, right? So the main objective is just to get somebody to commit to making a change with you. Understand that. So stop telling yourself some bullshit fucking reasons that it didn't work out, and tell yourself the truth. And that's the fact that you didn't properly objection handle, which simply means you didn't properly shift their mindset. That's all it is. Objection handling is literally just coaching them. Understand that. And so here's the framework. So let's just go with the, I got to think about it. That's like the most common one, So the first thing you do is you acknowledge. You say, totally get that, man. And then you clarify. But what specifically do you have to think about? Do we got to think about like wanting to make the change, or is it like the pricing thing, right? So now what you're trying to do is clarify exactly what they have to think about, because pretty much every single objection you'll ever get is like a smoke screen. I got to think about it. It's just a smoke screen for something deeper. Once again, symptom and root cause. Most of the initial objections you will hear is a symptom, right? I got to think about it. They feel like they have to think about it. The root cause is probably maybe enough trust and belief wasn't fulfilled. Maybe they're too comfortable with being comfortable. Maybe they just don't even have the money to make it happen, or they're not sure how they're going to make it happen. So you got to clarify and start digging down to find the real objection. Number 3 will become confirmed belief, right? So this is where you go, totally get it. What specifically do you have to think about? Oh, you got to think about the money side of things. Okay. So based on what we covered, though, do you feel like this is going to get you to where you want to go? Yes. They're confirming the belief now. This is exactly what I need. And then you expose the cost of inaction. Okay, awesome. But what will happen in 3 to 6 months from now if nothing changes? Like you said earlier, you want to make sure the next 6 months of your life do not look like the past 6 months of your life. But what's going to happen if we don't make a change? And they're going to say, I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm not going to do that. I need to make a change. And then identity reframe. Perfect. So like, what would the best version of yourself that has X, Y, and Z, that has overcame X, Y, and Z do right now, right? That has the 6-pack of abs and has overcame procrastinating. What would he do? Oh, he would make the change right now. And then decision prop. So what's the move? Well, the move would be to sign up, and then once again, they're going to hit you with another objection. I just don't have the full investment. And then that's once again when you restart the universal flow. Totally get that, man. But what specifically makes you feel like we can't get started today if you don't have the full investment? And then they'll go, well, do I have to pay you in full? I mean, then you say, hey, yeah, majority of people pay me in full, but we can always work something out. Would you be open to, looking into, payment plans or financing options? Yeah, okay. But based on what we covered, if we can work a payment deal out or, finance an option, would you be ready to get started today? Yeah. Awesome. And so really to wrap this up, the best mindset to have is, once again, be a doctor, get insanely curious, really get to the root bottom of what is going on here. That's the best way you can guarantee that you uncover every single little piece of dirt and every single little micro bit of information that you need to make the sale happen. And now that you understand how to sell, you're probably going to have the issue of actually getting more people to sell. Marketing. And so the first link in the description is going to be a 3.5-hour free course breaking down exactly how I marketed my fitness coaching to make over $500,000, but also how I helped out other people just like yourself market their fitness coaching. For example, Ari, he went from $0 to $44.5 thousand in 120 days following this right here. Sorry about the loud train in Miami. I know it's loud out here, but what's also loud is fitness coaching at the moment. So click on that link in the description, learn how to market yourself online, because now you know how to sell. I'll see you there.